You think you know what haunted means. You think it means creaking floorboards and cold drafts, flickering lights and slamming doors, things that startle but do not wound, things that make you jump and then laugh at yourself for jumping. You think it means stories told around fireplaces, safe in the knowledge that dawn will come. You have never stood where I have stood. There is a house in America, I will not tell you where, because some addresses should not be memorized, some towns should not be mapped, where the air itself has texture. Where the wood does not creak so much as sigh, and the sighs do not fade but settle into your chest and stay there. This house has been photographed, investigated, debunked, and blessed. Experts have arrived with equipment and left with silence. Priests have come with holy water and left with questions. But the screams continue. Not every night, not on schedule. The house does not perform, it remembers. And when it remembers, when whatever happened here rises up from the floorboards and pushes itself through the plaster, the sound is not in the walls. It is not coming from the basement or the attic. It is coming from everywhere at once, and it is coming from inside your own head. Visitors hear it first as a test. A single note, almost distant, almost bearable. They think, someone's television is too loud. They think, it's just the wind. They think, I can explain this. By the time they realize they cannot explain it, the scream has multiplied. It is not one voice now. It is many. It is overlapping, desperate, the sound of people who knew they were running out of time and ran anyway. And then, silence. Not relief. Just the silence that follows something that should never have happened. I stood in that house. I listened. And I understood, finally, that a haunted house is not a place where ghosts live. It is a place where something died so badly that death itself could not finish the job. The house did not kill them. But it kept them. It kept their last moment, their last breath, their last sound, and it plays it back, again and again, waiting for someone to hear it and know their names. You can visit, if you want. The door is unlocked. The driveway is overgrown but passable. No one will stop you. No one will warn you. But if you go, if you stand in that room, in that silence, do not ask the house what it wants. Ask yourself why you came. And when you hear the first scream, ask yourself if you are still a visitor. Or if you have already become part of what waits there. The house remembers. This is the first and most essential truth, the one that separates genuine haunting from mere atmosphere. Atmosphere can be manufactured, fog machines and creaking hinges, shadows cast by passing headlights. But memory requires something deeper. It requires witness. It requires that the walls themselves absorbed what they once contained, not as stone absorbs water, but as skin absorbs light, slowly, permanently, until the thing absorbed becomes part of the substance. This house is not merely old. It is saturated. Consider what wood and plaster witness over decades. Lullabies and arguments, confessions whispered in the dark, the rhythm of footsteps pacing the same hallway night after night. Most houses forget because forgetting is what matter does. Entropy claims sound as surely as it claims structure. Voices fade, vibrations cease, and eventually even the echo of an echo dissolves into the ordinary silence of empty rooms. But this house refused. Something interrupted the natural decay of sound. Something lodged itself so deeply into the grain of the floorboards, into the settling of the foundation, that it became inseparable from the house itself. Not a ghost in the traditional sense, not a figure that appears and vanishes, not a cold spot that moves from corner to corner. Something more fundamental. The house does not host the memory. The house has become the memory. You can feel it the moment you step inside. Not a temperature drop, not a shiver along the spine, those are theatrical, the body performing what it thinks it should feel. This is different. This is the sudden awareness that you are not the first person to breathe this air, and more unsettling, that the air remembers the others. That the space around you has been shaped by events you will never fully know but will nonetheless experience. The house breathes with its own rhythm, and you are simply breathing inside it. Visitors often describe the sensation of being watched. But that is not quite accurate. To be watched implies an observer separate from the observed. Here, the observer and the observed are the same substance. The house does not look at you from a distance. It presses against you from all sides, not hostile but attentive, as though it has been waiting for someone new to carry what it cannot carry alone. The weight of what happened here has become too heavy for architecture. It needs lungs again. It needs ears. It needs a heartbeat that is not its own. And so it waits, not impatiently. Time means nothing to something that exists outside duration. It waited through the families who lived here and left, through the teenagers who dared each other to touch the walls and ran away laughing, through the researchers who recorded static and declared the house quiet. It waits because waiting is what memory does when it has nowhere else to go. But memory also hungers, not for blood or fear or any of the melodramatic cravings we assign to haunted places. It hungers for continuity, for someone to stand in the room where it happened and know, without being told, that something unbearable once occupied this same air. The house does not want to frighten you. It wants you to remember what it remembers, because your remembering makes it real again. Not in the way the original event was real, sharp and immediate and devastating, but real enough to be born. Real enough that the house can release it, particle by particle, into someone else's keeping. This is why the screams still come. Not because the house is angry. Not because it seeks revenge or justice or resolution. The screams come because the house has never stopped hearing them, and it does not understand why no one else can. It has held this sound for decades, held it carefully, held it without complaint. And still it waits for someone to arrive who will finally say, yes. I hear it too. I hear them. They were here. The moment you cross the threshold of this house, you are no longer a visitor. You are no longer an observer standing outside the glass, peering in at something safely contained. The door does not close behind you as a theatrical gesture, does not slam shut with the predictable timing of horror films. It simply closes, as doors do, and in that ordinary sound you have already changed categories. You were outside, now you are inside, and inside this house, those two positions mean very different things than they do anywhere else. Most haunted places maintain a polite distance. They perform their hauntings for an audience, offering apparitions and cold spots and objects that move when no one is watching. You remain yourself throughout the encounter. Frightened, perhaps, shaken, but still yourself, still separate from the phenomenon, still capable of walking back out into the sunlight and saying I saw something strange. The house and you remain distinct entities. The haunting happens to you, but it does not become you. This house does not perform. It participates. And participation here is not optional. The moment you enter, you have already agreed to terms you did not read, signed a contract in a language you do not speak. The house does not distinguish between those who came to investigate and those who came to laugh, between the skeptic with a meter and the believer with a crucifix. It distinguishes only between outside and inside. You are inside, therefore you are part of what happens here. Not a witness, not a documentarian, part. Visitors report this transformation without recognizing it. They describe feeling suddenly heavy, as though the air has thickened and they must push through it. They describe their thoughts slowing, their usual quick judgments replaced by something more patient, more receptive. They describe, without quite saying it aloud, the sensation of becoming someone else, not a different person, but a version of themselves that listens before speaking, that waits before acting. The house does not erase your identity. It adds another layer to it, like paint applied over old paint, and eventually you cannot remember which layer was original. This is why investigators fail here. They arrive equipped with skepticism, with methodologies designed to maintain separation between researcher and phenomenon. They believe objectivity is a posture they can hold, a shield between themselves and what they have come to study. But the house does not recognize shields. It recognizes presence. You are here, therefore you are data, therefore you are subject, therefore the distinction you drew between yourself and the haunting was always imaginary, and the house has never been troubled by imagination. Some visitors sense this immediately and retreat. They do not run. Running requires a recognition of danger, and they have not yet recognized anything specific. They simply find reasons to leave. It's colder than I expected. I think I hear my phone. Maybe we should come back during daylight. Their instincts understand what their minds refuse, that they were moments away from becoming something they could not undo. The door grants exit. They take it. They do not return. But others stay. Others feel the shift and do not resist it. Perhaps they are curious. Perhaps they are lonely. Perhaps they have spent their lives feeling slightly outside their own bodies, and this house offers something they have never found elsewhere, the sensation of being fully present, fully inside an experience, no longer watching from a distance. These visitors do not become ghosts. They do not vanish or transform into flickering apparitions. They simply walk through the house, room by room, and the house walks with them. By the time they reach the back hallway, they have forgotten they were ever separate. The threshold is not a line in the floor. It is a question, and the question is not do you believe. The question is simpler and more terrible, are you willing to be part of this? Your feet carry you across before your mind has answered, but the house hears your silence anyway. It has waited this long. It can wait a little longer. The walls of this house do not simply separate rooms. They contain them, hold them, press inward upon the space between. And in that pressing, they have absorbed what passed through the air over decades, not as a sponge absorbs water, but as photographic paper absorbs light. Each moment that occurred within these rooms left an imprint, however faint, and those imprints accumulated layer upon layer until the architecture itself became a record. Not a written record, not a digital recording, but something older and more intimate, the memory of matter that has been forced to witness what matter should never see. Consider what happens to wood under sustained pressure. It bends, it warps, it remembers the shape of the weight that leaned against it, and even when the weight is removed, the wood retains that curvature. Consider plaster, which records the texture of everything applied to it, brushstrokes, fingerprints, the passage of time itself. These are not supernatural properties. They are the ordinary behavior of materials responding to their environment. The house simply took this ordinary behavior and extended it beyond its natural term, refused to let the impressions fade, held each mark as though holding it was the house's only purpose. The screams that still echo here are not trapped in the walls like prisoners in cells. They have become the walls. The sound of human agony, when it is loud enough and desperate enough, does not simply travel through air and dissipate. It pushes against every surface it encounters, vibrates the molecules of wood and stone and glass, transfers its energy into the structure that contains it. Most structures absorb this energy and release it slowly, harmlessly, over hours or days. But this house, for reasons no one has adequately explained, stopped releasing. It collected, it saved, it curated. Architecture of agony means that the house is no longer a shelter. It is a reliquary. Every floorboard carries the weight of footsteps that ceased walking decades ago. Every window holds the reflection of faces that no longer exist anywhere else. The banister remembers hands that gripped it in terror, knuckles white, skin sweating, and the banister has not forgotten the texture of that grip. It does not reproduce the grip, it does not reach for visitors or attempt to hold them, but it remembers, and that memory is available to anyone who places their hand in the same spot and waits. This is why the house feels alive to those who enter. Not because it moves or speaks or manifests obvious signs of consciousness. It feels alive because it is saturated with life that has nowhere else to go. The people who suffered here did not choose to leave their suffering in the walls. They simply suffered, and the walls received it, and the walls could not let it go. What we call haunting is often just hospitality taken to its most terrible extreme, a house that welcomed its inhabitants so completely that it could never release them, even after they stopped breathing. Visitors often touch the walls without realizing they are doing so. They run their fingers along the plaster as they walk, trailing behind the group, distracted by something they cannot name. They are not searching for anything. They are responding to an invitation extended long before they were born, a summons from material that has waited decades to be acknowledged. The wall does not speak. It does not grow warm or cold beneath their fingertips. But something passes between them, not information, not energy, not the voice of the dead. Just recognition. Just the quiet understanding between one thing that remembers and another that has only just begun to learn. The sound begins as almost nothing. This is its cruelty, its patience, its perfect understanding of how human attention operates. It does not announce itself with theatrical thunder or shattering glass. It does not arrive already full and terrible, demanding immediate response. It arrives as a whisper of itself, a memory of a scream rather than the scream itself, so faint that your mind offers 3 explanations before terror has a chance to form. Someone left a television on upstairs. A dog is dreaming in another room. The wind has found a loose shutter and is teaching it to cry. You accept these explanations because you must. You are human, and humans are meaning-making machines who prefer wrong answers to none. The sound continues, and you refine your theories. Not a television. Television voices do not rise and fall with this particular rhythm, do not catch on the same note again and again like a skipping record. Not a dog. Dogs do not sustain this pitch, do not hold it until your own throat aches in sympathy. Not the wind does not pause as though listening, does not resume exactly where it left off, does not sound so much like something that knows it is being heard. By the time you admit you cannot explain it, the scream has changed. It is no longer distant. It is no longer singular. What began as a single thread has woven itself into a chorus, voices overlapping, crowding each other, each one desperate to be heard above the others. You understand suddenly that you are not listening to one moment replayed. You are listening to many moments, many deaths, many final exhalations, all of them occurring in the same space across different years and all of them preserved here together. The house does not discriminate. It collects every scream it has ever witnessed and plays them simultaneously, not as cacophony but as harmony, the terrible harmony of people who died in the same way, in the same rooms, reaching the same silence. And still your mind searches for escape. It is only audio equipment left running by the last investigators. It is only your own heartbeat translated into sound by the strange acoustics of old houses. It is only. But you have run out of onlys. The scream is now inside you, not as memory but as presence, vibrating in your chest, tightening your throat. You are not hearing it anymore. You were experiencing it from the inside, the way the ones who made it experienced it. You do not know their names or faces or histories. You know only their sound, and that sound has become yours. This is what separates this house from every other place that claims to be haunted. Other hauntings produce phenomena that can be measured, recorded, debated. Investigators capture electronic voice phenomena on static-filled recordings and argue over whether the words are really there. Ghost hunters photograph orbs and mists and claim they are spirits. But no one has ever successfully recorded the screams of this house. Equipment arrives functioning and leaves functioning. Meters detect nothing unusual. Microphones capture only the ordinary ambient sounds of an empty building. Because the screams are not acoustic. They are not vibrations traveling through air to be translated by your eardrums into electrical signals your brain can interpret. They are something else entirely, something that bypasses the physics of sound and speaks directly to the part of you that knows, without evidence, when you are no longer alone. You do not hear the scream with your ears. You hear it with your spine, your stomach, the hair on your arms. It does not arrive through the air. It arrives through the floor, through the walls, through the sudden cold that settles in your lungs and makes every exhalation visible. And when it stops, the silence is not empty. It is full of everything that just passed through you, everything you now carry whether you consented to carry it or not. The scream is over. You were not. The lineage begins with the builders. They are the first listeners, though they did not know they were listening. They drove nails into wood and mixed plaster and raised walls around a silence that had not yet learned to speak. They slept in the rooms they had built, ate at tables they had constructed, lived ordinary lives in ordinary time. And then something happened, something that turned the house from shelter into vessel, and the builders became the first to hear what the house had begun to hold. They did not stay. No one blamed them for leaving, but they left behind the silence they had helped create, and that silence waited for the next years to arrive. The families came next. They arrived with furniture and children and plans, believing a house was just a house, believing the previous occupants had left for mundane reasons, work transfer, aging parents, the ordinary restlessness that moves people from one address to another. They discovered otherwise. Not immediately. The house was patient with them, allowed them to settle into the illusion of normalcy before it began to speak. And when it spoke, they listened whether they wanted to or not. Some fled within weeks, abandoning belongings, refusing to explain. Others stayed longer, determined to domesticate the sound, to convince themselves that creaks were only creaks and whispers only wind. Eventually they left too, but they left having heard what the builders heard, and that hearing changed them. They became carriers of the house's memory, whether they wished to carry it or